Well, good evening. We've got Scott Zappolo back, and our experience with Mr. Zappolo on our last podcast was so good that he blew the doors off of our downloads, which he's doubled or tripled anything we've put out so far. But welcome back, Scott, and thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule and attending our podcast. Uh, in case our listeners don't know Scott or didn't see his previous podcast, Scott's a trial attorney here in South Florida. He's also a firearms instructor. He's been practicing law for 25 years, uh, so he's got a lot of experience. He's also a former competitive shooter, and uh, actually, he's an avid shooter, and he is well aware of some of the things we need to talk about in terms of safety, situational awareness, and victimology. I want to talk about some situations with Scott that might be familiar to almost everyone out there. Tonight, we're going to have a little bit of special emphasis on our female listeners. The reason I'm saying that is because through my law enforcement experience, it's become quite apparent that women are quite common victims in many situations simply because they're small and in many cases and they're unable to defend themselves, and therefore they become the target of a predator. So what we're going to talk about tonight is going to be somewhat directed for our female listeners and or family members, and hopefully when you've listened to what we're going to talk about, you'll walk away a little better understanding of how to protect yourself, or if the worst thing comes to pass, you're able to react in a way that's going to save your life. Scott, do you have anything you'd like to say before we get into the questions?
Just that as an attorney in the state of Florida, anything that I say that might be specifically legal related is kind of geared towards the state of Florida. I'm not licensed to practice in other states, so I can't give you legal advice about what goes on in other states. I can give you very practical advice about uh, being a safe individual, looking out for the safety of yourself and others. Certified NRA instructor. I do not speak on behalf of the NRA. All the comments that I will share with you guys tonight are my own and attributable solely to me. Other than that, let's go, Jim.
That sounds very lawyerly. Appreciate that. I, I think in a spirit of a discussion, all of what we're going to talk about tonight is basically both of our opinions, and it's based on life experiences and professional experiences. Um, it's not on behalf of any entity or organization or anything like that. So, uh, listeners, be advised, take it for what it's worth. And trust me, between Scott and I, we've probably got about 75 years of experience in the various businesses we're involved in, with him as a trial attorney. And by the way, Scott is also the son of one of my best friends, a former state trooper in New York State, and well connected with law enforcement and understands the law enforcement situation. So, the first question I got, Scott, again, a situational question. You're driving alone at night. The vehicle that's following you runs into the back of your car that you're driving. What do you do?
Well, you have kind of mentioned or referred to a very common, unfortunately, situation that happens a lot here in South Florida. And I will say, Jim, it doesn't have to be at night, okay? It's going to happen anytime that your defenses are down, anytime that you're not paying particular attention to what you're doing. Right now, we're going into the holidays. This type of thing happens all the time. People coming out of the mall, you've got a car full of, and unfortunately, sometimes people go shopping at the mall. They throw a television set in there, a beautiful gold necklace for their spouse or what have you, presents for the children, and you might have several $1,000s worth of merchandise in your car without even discussing whether or not you should have that stuff in plain view in your vehicle, which is an absolute no-no. But people watch. Bad guys hang out where good people are most vulnerable. And one of the places, especially during this time of year, is the mall. And if you're not paying attention to your surroundings at the mall, you are setting yourself up to be a victim. So what happens? Typical scenario, somebody is at the mall, they're buying a lot of goods, they're not thinking about the evil that goes on in the world, they're thinking happy thoughts about the holidays, they are walking to their car with bundles of gifts, and a bad person is watching them and decides, hey, that's a wonderful person I'd like to follow, because they see the type of bag that you have. You know, Macy's likes to have you use their bags. Um, the little blue bags of other, jewelry stores and things like that. A bad guy sees one of those, he wants to follow you, he or she. And by the way, these days, they work in groups. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to watch television and see that smash and grabs, groups are on the rise in this country and things like that. So, you talked about, a vehicle following you home. They have to follow you from somewhere. Where are they going to follow you from? They're not going to follow you from your next door neighbor's house or someone down the street. They're going to follow you from a target rich environment. A target rich environment this time of year and other times of the year is the mall. Okay. So, what you need to do is, as you're walking to your car at the mall, first of all, try not to be walking with a lot of packages and other things, because you could be approached and or accosted before you even get to your car. That's number one. Number two, your scenario said you're in your car, you're driving home. Okay, great. You've made it to your car, you've put your packages in your car. Now the bad guys have seen you load the packages into the car, they start following you home. You're doing everything that you're supposed to, except you're not paying enough attention to your surroundings. Why? You're distracted. So, number one rule, don't be distracted and always be aware of your surroundings. Growing up, a friend of mine's father, the small town I grew up in upstate New York, most of the families there, they were the cops or firefighters. And my friend's dad I remember when he was teaching my good friend's older brother to drive, we'd be driving down the street and he'd say, tell me about the car behind you. And his brother would have to say, well, it's a black Cadillac Escalade, or, they didn't have Escalades back then, but, and then he would follow up. And is it a male or a female driving? And how close are they to you, etc. One of the interesting things is bad guys typically follow closely. I guess it's just because they're not that smart and they want to be sure that they're able to see what you're doing, etc. So they will typically follow closer than other people. So you need to be aware of your surroundings. You need to be aware of the vehicles that are around you. Um, Bad things happen from behind, as a general rule. You see all these scenarios where someone will bump into a car and you get out, you've been in a minor fender bump, and you, as a good citizen, stop, you get out of the car, you want to exchange information, you're feeling badly. The reality of it is those things come from behind. Okay. Very rarely do we hear a story about someone driving across a lane, hitting you head on, and then getting out and saying, oh my goodness, I'm so, sorry, and what have you. And then they use that as an opportunity to strong arm rob you or take your vehicle. Most of the time it happens from behind. And where are we looking when we're driving our car? A lot of people are looking ahead. I have to tell you, people, you need to look backwards when you're backing up. Okay, backing by braille is not a good thing. Okay, when you back up until you bump into something, I see this all too often, especially with these new onboard cameras and things like that. You're just watching the camera, you're not paying attention to your surroundings. The automakers know this. That's why they put a warning on there when you're backing up. You need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. And unfortunately, when you get tied into the holidays and things like that, you'll forget. And that's when bad things happen. Bad things happen when you're not paying attention to your surroundings. So, to to get back to your question, Jim, I'm sorry. Vehicles following you. Well, first of all, you need to understand that it's important for you to know when a vehicle is actually following you or when it's just a vehicle that happens to be going the same way as you. Okay. There's a few things that you can do. Most vehicles that are following you are going to follow you closely. Okay, that's just one of those things. You see it in the movies. It's agitating to me to see someone following that closely, and the person driving the car doesn't realize they're being followed. But if you suspect that a vehicle's following you, what should you do? Well, you don't have to speed. You shouldn't do anything other than stay in a public place. Don't go out to your house that's out in the farmland. Stay in the well lit city or municipal areas till you can make a few turns. Okay. Stay where there are people. People are generally something that deters crime, right? Bad guys don't like to do bad things in front of a lot of people. You don't really hear about people getting bumped from behind and then carjacked in Times Square in New York City. Why? There are thousands of witnesses. So you want to stay where there's going to be a lot of witnesses. You want to make some turns. And if you make several turns and that car is still on you, then you've got a pretty good idea that someone's perhaps following you. If you feel that someone is following you inappropriately, there's a wonderful thing in America called a cell phone, and a 911 call is always a lot better than getting carjacked. The police are not going to fault you if you say, I've turned 6 times now and this car is on my rear end every single turn. Can we get to a police officer, or can a police officer come to me? If you know where the police station is, driving to the police station. Bad guys are not going to bump you in the rear and try and carjack you in the police station parking lot. So stay in a public area with lots of people around, well lit. Don't drive home, because if you think that you're being followed and you drive home, most people don't live in well lit areas with a lot of other people around. Your phone is a defensive weapon. Use it. Okay. Um, don't be afraid of that. If you happen to have not paid attention and you're driving along and you stop at a red light and someone comes up and bumps you, the reality of it is, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to hit you so hard that you realize you've been in a car accident. You're going to feel like it was just a little accidental bump. And what do most people feel? Oh, it was an accident. It was just a little bump. Okay. You need to know the difference between an accidental bump, which is much rarer these days, than if someone blew the red light or whatever and your car's demolished, the odds are they're not going to try and steal your car and drive away with your demolished car. Okay. So it usually comes in the form of a bump. Someone will get out of the car. Don't think it has to be just a single individual. There are frequently groups. There are a number of different techniques that can be used. You may have heard, Jim, of a swoop and squat, where they get in front of you and then all of a sudden they jam down the brakes. You jam on your brakes and then the car from behind you hits you. Oh, now you've been in an accident. Okay. The first car has already blocked you in, so you can't go anywhere. The car behind you has bumped you, and then they get out and they want to talk to you and everything. Now they're approaching you. And I think, Jim, you had mentioned to me before you wanted to discuss armed versus unarmed in these situations. Well, absolutely. Well, as I've talked with you about, scenarios before, armed is a better way to be, right? But you might not always be armed. And if you happen to be in a situation like that where you're not armed, understand this. One of the biggest weapons that a police officer has, one of the things that unfortunately kills more citizens at the hands of police even than gunfire in America, are their vehicles. You have the biggest weapon at your disposal, and it's called your car. Okay. Once you get out of your car, you are disarmed from that vehicle. If I'm in my vehicle and someone comes out and they point a gun at me or try to, beat on my door and try and pull me out or something, the gas pedal's a wonderful thing. Don't think that if I feel threatened, and by the way, you don't have to shoot someone if you feel threatened. If your life is in danger and you run them over, that's just as appropriate as pulling out a gun and shooting them. Okay. So remember that your car is something that's going to give you a level of protection that you don't have once you get out of your vehicle. Okay. So the first question is, if you happen to be bumped, are you going to get out of your vehicle? My suggestion to you is no, unless you are 100 million% confident that everything is quote unquote on the up and up. And then once you think that everything's on the up and up, reassess your surroundings, because that little old lady that bumped you might be working with the three thugs in the car ahead of you. And you look and you say, oh, it's just a little old lady. And you get out of the car and you start walking back to her car, and then you've been attacked by three thugs. So once don't get out of your car unless you are 100% confident that it is safe to do so. If you are unarmed, especially if you happen to be in a car accident, there are very, 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 very few police officers, and you can back me up on this, Jim, that will fault you for immediately dialing 911, saying, I've just been struck from behind or what have you, and I'm concerned for my safety. So I'm pulling into this large supermarket parking lot where I see 30 people. Or I'm driving to the police station that I know is, a block and a half away. Would you please have an officer come outside and meet me? Um, so getting out of your car is, as a general rule, a no-no until you are 100% confident that you are in a safe space. And after you've just been struck, generally not until you're 100% certain that you're in a safe space. After you've been struck, it's generally not considered a safe space. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule. If you've been in a multiple vehicle accident and, you've unfortunately struck a pedestrian or something like that, you have to pay attention to those scenarios. But especially if you don't have any weapon on you and the ability to defend yourself, you want to be sure that you are safe before you render aid to others. I learned in lifeguard training a long, 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 long time ago. You can't save someone if you're injured yourself. A drowning lifeguard can't save someone else from drowning. So the reality of it is we might feel badly that we left the scene of an accident or something like that. And you're technically, look, on a lot of laws in a lot of states, you're not supposed to leave the scene of an accident. But the odds of you being charged with something like that under the very important circumstances of you being fearful for your safety, those are a lot smaller. And I'd much rather be charged with leaving the scene of an accident than be carjacked and pistol whipped or, God forbid, shot or stabbed or something like that for something as simple as my car. A word along that there are a lot of people, guys especially, and Jim, you mentioned women. I want to talk to guys for a second. It's a car. It's insured 99% of the time. You're going to get another one. It's not the first car you've had. It probably won't be the last car you've had. It's not worth a life. It's not worth your life. And as frustrating as it may be, it's probably not worth their life. But the reality of it is, if someone gets you out of the car and they're going to take your car, you know what you say? Good luck, buddy. Here's the keys. Walk away. Just remove yourself from that bad situation. Okay, getting dragged or something like that. We see these things on television, the cops TV show. The law enforcement officers they're charged with a different standard. Okay, somebody wants to take my car, they point a gun at me, they've got the drop on me or whatever. Even if I have a gun on my hip, you know what I'm doing? I'm getting out of the car. They could have my car. It's not worth it to me. It's not worth my life. I know that for certain. Now, do I want to retaliate or whatever? Maybe yes. Do I have a right to, defend myself and my vehicle in the state of Florida? Yes. But the reality of it is, as we discussed last time, from a moral standpoint, is it right? I don't know, but everyone's going to have to make that decision for themselves. But I'm going to tell you something. If you've got the drop on me because I was not paying attention, then guess what? You get my car. It's just not worth it. So from a unarmed standpoint, the most important thing you can do is stay with your car. I want to share something else with you, and a lot of law enforcement officers and or FBI agents or what have you will probably share this thought. If you ever think that you're being kidnapped, Don't ever think that by acquiescing to the bad guy that you're going to do something good and get away later. Once they take you from that scene, the odds decrease so dramatically that they'll find you and that you'll be safe. Okay, it's not like television where the private eye comes in or whatever. If they're going to take you away and incapacitate you, that's the time right then, right there, with whatever you have, you're fighting for your life. If they say get out of the car and they're going to get out of the car is fine. You get out of the car and they hop in your car and they drive away, that's one thing. They say get out of the car and you get out of the car and then they're grabbing you and trying to pull you towards their car, a van or an SUV or whatever it is. That's the time when instantly you have to be fighting because you are fighting for your life at that point. So don't ever, ever, ever get in a vehicle. Don't ever leave the scene. Don't allow them to take you, whether you're armed or you're not armed. That's a point where you bite, scratch, kick, scream, run, do whatever is necessary, because when they're trying to put you into their car, the odds are magnified greatly that you are not coming home. Okay, so someone bumps you, hopefully you've been paying attention, you saw it coming or what have you. Unfortunately, a lot of us from day to day, especially around the holidays, are paying attention to other things. Goodness gracious, don't be texting and driving. When you're texting and driving, you don't see not only the car that or the pedestrian that you're about to hit, but you darn sure are not paying attention to the car that's following you too closely that's about to bump you. So no texting and driving, things like that. Hopefully you have hands free. You get bumped, instantly call. I hit that button on my steering wheel. Call 911, and I'm talking with the 911 operator. My doors are locked. By the way, do you lock your doors when you're driving? Are you seat belted in? You should be seat belted in so that if someone bumps you, that you're not jostled so much, your head doesn't hit the dash or the steering wheel or something like that. But so obey all the traffic laws. Be aware of your surroundings, especially behind you, because that's where the danger is coming from. And if you find yourself where you've been bumped or in an accident, understand that once you get out of the vehicle, it's a game changer. So in Florida, I'm a concealed weapons license holder, and if I get out of my car, my gun is on my hip. I'm still armed. I'm still able to defend myself. But the reality of it is, if there's five guys and I'm looking and I notice that, I'm probably not getting out of my car anyway, even though I've got a gun on my hip, because I don't want to have that confrontation. As I've told you before, and as any in my opinion, a decent instructor will tell you, we carry a firearm to save life and preserve life, not to take it. And just because I could get out of the car doesn't mean that I should get out of the car. And just because I'm supposed to stop in an accident scenario, that's great. But your personal safety overrules every law and every scenario. So obey your spider sense. If you sense that something is not right, you stay on that phone, you keep your doors locked, and if somebody tries to look, a normal person that bumps your car, they get out, they're very apologetic. They're not going to be trying to get you out of that car. They're not going to be aggressive. At the point that someone's aggressive to you, you know what you need to do. And one of the best weapons that you have is right by your right foot. It's called the gas pedal. And if you've got to run them over to, protect your own life, then you should do that. Of course, like with all life and death scenarios and self-defense scenarios, you have to be able to articulate the reasonable fear for your life, etc. If it happens to be a teenager, a single teenager, he gets out of the car, you're not in danger. Stay in your car. If you're not sure, stay in your car. When he starts beating on the car, if you happen to be hemmed in because they did the swoop and squat and there's a car in front of you and a car behind you and you really can't back up or you've got nowhere to go, at that point, if you happen to have your weapon with you, then you might consider seriously deploying it. But as with all things, understand, are they trying to take your car? Or are they trying to take your life? Big difference in my perspective. So, protect yourself, be aware of your surroundings. But that's a number one thing. I don't know whether I've covered that for you, Jim, or not,
You
but
did. I just a little footnote on just to add on what you said. One of the things that I learned on when I worked patrol is you always when you approach a stoplight and you're in a rough neighborhood, allow yourself a little exit strategy for how if somebody approached your car and attacked you or tried to attack you in a menacing way, you've got a way to get around the car in front of you, even if you got to drive on a sidewalk, even if you got to run a red light. Plan a little, give yourself some room so you can navigate your vehicle to escape. Try to think about that when you're at night and you're in a rough neighborhood, a high crime area, and you need to be aware that if you pin yourself in by driving real close to the car in front of you and stop, and there's cars all around you, you're not going anywhere because you're trapped. So give yourself some space so you can have an exit strategy.
I've got a little trick for that, Jim, that my driver's ed teacher taught me back, when I was a young gentleman. And that was, they tell you for safety purposes, you always want to be able to see the tires, the rear tires of the car in front of you. If you can see the tires of the rear car in front of you touching the pavement, odds are pretty good you're going to be able to cut your wheel and drive around them. Okay. And they said that in case you get rear-ended, you don't want to get plowed into the car in front of you. But that's a dual, it's a double reason. If you have that room and you can see the car tires touching the pavement of the car in front of you, you've got enough room to steer around them if necessary. That's number one. Another thing that just popped into my mind is in this day and age with all these cars with their auto shutoffs, okay, you're stopped at a light, the car turns itself off. Okay. Now, the manufacturers will tell you, oh yeah, all you do, then you take your foot off the brake and then you step on the gas. What do we know? Typically, that takes about a second and a half to 2 seconds before your car is actually able to accelerate. If you're in a nighttime scenario, you're in a situation where you're concerned about your safety or whatever, reach down and touch that button on your dash that turns that function off. Because a second or a second and a half or even a half a second is a life and death difference. Okay. So if you're driving at night, you're in a quote unquote bad area or what have you, definitely shut that thing off. I shut the on off switch off on my car all the time. Okay. And I understand, look, we all love the planet and what have you, but it takes at least 7 seconds for that. From my research, it takes at least 7 seconds for that to be effective to actually save you any gas and what have you. But the reality of it is, you're not worried about the half a cent of gas that you're going to save in a dangerous situation. So shut that thing off if you're driving and you think you might have a dangerous situation where you might need your car to react the instant you step on the gas. Just a little tidbit.
That's a good. This is all good stuff, Scott. One thing I just wanted to mention here, and I don't want to sound like a sexist, but uh, from my experience, I see a lot of victims um, because they're women, and maybe they weren't the crime against them didn't start out to be necessarily a crime to hurt them. It could have been a robbery. It could have been they're trying to carjack your vehicle, and then it turns into a kidnap and a rape and a murder because it's a victim of opportunity. They see a chance to grab a person that's vulnerable, attractive, possibly, and it goes to the next level. So that's why we're pointing out the issue of actually the science is called victimology. We study what why victims are victims and some of the actions that precipitates them being victims. And that's what we're talking about today. One more question, Scott. This is very interesting stuff, by the way, and very good. You need to get gas. It's 10 o'clock at night. It's cold. It's raining. You pull into a self serve gas station. You see a couple guys lurking in the parking lot over by the Dipsty dumpster, drinking wine. What do you do?
First of all, you ask yourself, what in the HE double hockey sticks am I doing getting gas at night in a situation where there's gentlemen around, and I use that phrase, loosely, drinking wine, etc. The bottom line, folks, if your dad didn't teach you, he should have. Your gas tank gets down to a quarter tank, it's time to, refill, okay? Because in the middle of the night, if you're running out of gas, you're running out of options. You're running out of opportunities to defend yourself, and you're running out of opportunities to avoid a problem. If you've got no gas in your car, your gas indicator is going bong 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 bong, and you've got 5 miles in a tank, and you don't know where the next gas station is. Now you're forced into that bad situation. I'm not forced into that bad situation because I got a quarter tank. I can go another 100 miles. I don't need to stop at that gas station where I either see those bad guys or the potentially bad guys. And look, they might just be hanging out, drinking wine, and be the nicest people you ever want to meet. But why am I going to take that chance? And why should you take that chance? So many people are victims because they think that the other guy is as nice and as good hearted as they are. And that's a problem. So look, I'll look at that person. I'll say, they're probably really nice guys, but why am I taking that chance? Okay. I've got a quarter tank of gas. So number one is don't get yourself and don't allow yourself to be in that scenario. Parents, teach your kids when you're teaching your daughter to drive. At a quarter tank, we get more gas. When you're teaching your son to drive, because it's Jim, you can say sexist all you want and everything, but I have to tell you this. In this day and age, there are victims that are male, there are victims that are female, and I got to tell you, it really doesn't even matter. I agree with you that women can be in a particularly vulnerable state, etc. But when someone's hopped up on crack or whatever, and they want your car, they don't really care. Now, if you happen to have a son who's 320 pounds, built like a linebacker for Florida State and prepared to defend himself, well, that's a kind of a different scenario. But most parents don't have that child. They have to rely on the best muscle that they have, and that's their brain. And your brain should tell you, when your car's running low on gas, get more gas so that in the middle of the night when it's dark, you don't have to go to that gas station. Number two, if you happen to need gas, okay, great. Go to a well-lit area, etc. But as you pull up, understand that there are dark areas behind the gas station. Be aware of your surroundings, because you know what? The bad guys do. The bad guys know where to hide. The bad guys know what shadows to stand in, waiting for you to come in. And then when you get out of your car, they know how to approach you from behind. When I pump gas, my head is on a swivel, my body is on a swivel, and, quite frankly, my gun is on my hip. And I hate to say this, I love the area that I live in, and it's generally a very safe and reputable area. I've actually had and you and I have discussed this, Jim, I've actually had to draw on someone who was approaching me, who was obviously mentally disturbed, and he had a knife, and he was using it in a very threatening manner. And had he gotten within, 6 feet of me or something, he could have done harm. And any cop will tell you the 21-foot rule, right? If they're within 21 feet of you, they can attack you before you can draw, and they can plunge a knife into your chest or your carotid artery or whatever. 21 feet, that's a big distance that the average person doesn't, we think of personal space as 3 to 4 feet. My personal space when I'm pumping gas is 25 feet at least. And if you come inside a 25-foot zone, I'm wondering to myself, why is that person within my personal space? That's my safety space, is 25 feet. You get inside of 25 feet, I'm thinking about it, what have you. You get inside of 20 feet and I perceive you as a threat, I'm going to treat you as a threat. And so you ask me, what should they do? They have to get gas at night. Number one, don't have to get gas at night. Okay? Doc, it hurts when I do this. What should I do? Don't do that. Okay? I mean, it's kind of a common sense thing. But if you find yourself and you're in a scenario where you're saying to yourself, gosh, I screwed up. I didn't follow Dad's advice. I didn't follow Jimmy Mitchell's advice and make sure that I always had a quarter tank of gas. Here I am. I'm in a dark area of town. Stay where it's lighted. Stay where there are other people. Think about not going to a gas station where you're the only car. But if there are people, if there's three cars and they're all three men that look like they're young and reasonable and you think they might look out for you or what have you, maybe, pull up. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with saying, excuse me, sir, do you mind staying here and watching my back while I pump my gas? What self-respecting, macho man is not going to say, absolutely, you stay there, you go ahead, pump your gas. Okay. Now, of course, then you're relying on the kindness of another and making sure that other person is actually a good-hearted person. I'd rather not have to be in that scenario, and I'd rather that my child or my friend's child would not have to get gas in the middle of the night. But if they do, remember this, it's you carry a weapon for defensive purposes, and the gun that's in your glove box doesn't do you any good when you're attacked pumping gas. Okay? And I will tell you that it's very true. You have to have it with you. It has to be accessible. And before I get out of the car, I make sure, and I give a little elbow check on my hip, make sure, yep, it's still there, everything's good. But if you happen to be one of those people that keeps a firearm in your glove box, you might want to consider putting that on your person. Of course, keeping, all the laws of your state, municipality, etc., in mind. But for me, as I said before, the best gun to have or the best weapon to have is the one that you have. And if it's in the glove box, you don't have it. Okay. So if you're in that scenario and you find yourself, you should be kicking yourself, number one. That should only happen to you once in your life, because you should never allow that to happen again if you can help it at all. And then, be prepared, and your head should be on a swivel. 21 feet, 25 feet. Think about how far it is. And if you think I'm kidding you, Google it. Look at the 21-foot rule for, law enforcement officers, and even practice it. How fast could a bad guy cover 21 feet? It's incredibly fast. So just be aware of those things. And the best thing you can do is be aware of your surroundings. Don't get yourself in that situation. If you find yourself in that situation, be sure that you do the best to surround yourself with other people, because bad guys don't like to perpetrate, crimes in front of a lot of people. And, there's strength in numbers. And if you happen to find yourself in a scenario where you end up one-on-one with someone, one of the best things that you can do is look them dead in the eye. Don't shy away from them and say, how are you doing? 6'3", white male in a black shirt and blue jeans with a baseball cap that says Atlanta Braves. No disrespect to Atlanta Braves, okay? Because at that point, that person has been identified. Criminals like anonymity. Once you've done that, okay, they know they're no longer as anonymous as they would hope to be. And a lot of times that will just be enough to get someone to go the other way. But don't ever be afraid to hop in your car and drive away. Without paying gas, you can come back tomorrow. You can hop in your car, drive away without paying for the gas, dial 911 and say, I've just been accosted at so-and-such gas station. I left without paying for the gas. I want a police officer over here so I can go back and pay for the gas. Okay? Those gas pump nozzles are designed to break off even if it's still in your car. Would I drive away with a gas nozzle still in my car to save my life or the life of someone I love? Absolutely. Don't hesitate. Those are just things. That's just stuff. Protect yourself, protect your life, protect the lives of others. So number one. But the number one way that you do that, Jim, is being aware of your surroundings and thinking about those scenarios like you brought up in this case. And parents, teach your children. Teach your children to think about that. Talk about it out loud as you pull up for the gas station. Say, I see a man over there. I see a man over there. He's tired. He's sitting down. He looks a little suspicious. I'm going to keep an eye on this person, that person, etc. Talking out loud in front of your children will, because you know why? That's what my dad did. And it makes me just that much more aware of my surroundings all the time. When my dad would be driving down the road, he would say, look at this guy in the black Ford Escalade following us too closely. If I could read that license plate backwards, I would see that it says TL4395. Oh, that's a New York plate, or, whatever. He would do things like that. And I just grew up around that. And if your children grow up around that, they will be much more aware of their surroundings. They will be much safer. And if you didn't grow up around that, it's never too late to start thinking that way, especially if you're a vulnerable type person who's potentially a crime victim.
Very good, Scott. That was all good stuff. I just wanted to add just one more thing on the gas station scenario. Is ATM machines are another area where at night people are especially vulnerable, where they get out of their car and they go over to an ATM machine and withdraw cash, and it's just uh, it's just like feeding the beast, because the thieves going to hang around where the money gets distributed, and they're going to be waiting for the next victim to come along and provide them with some income. So that's something else to, maybe you want to do that transaction during the day. Even then, you got to be use your situational awareness, let your radar work for you out there. Listen, I really appreciate your helping us out with these suggestions, and um, I'm going to invite you to come back. And the next time we talk, I want to get back to the firearms issue. I want to talk to you about the really hard stuff to talk about, and that is, if you do have to use your weapon, how you deal with that, and the police and the response that you're going to have to deal with. And I'm sure that you've got stories that you could share with the listeners to kind of give them some insight on what it's really like in the real world when you do have to use a weapon. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there
Happy
anything
to talk
else
about it.
you want to do before we close it out?
Just to share with everyone, your safety is dependent upon you. And the most important thing that you can do to protect your own safety is be aware of your surroundings. Situational awareness, as you said. Be aware of your surroundings. A simple way. Thanks,
Scott,
Jim.
thank you so much. And by the way, in case I failed to mention it, which I did, uh, it's Christmas time, and it would be a good time to buy a gift for someone close to you, a relative, a friend, neighbor. And a really cool book is called A Badge Well Worn. It's on sale at Amazon. And Scott has read it, and he,
I'm going to
he
cut you off, Jim. I think it's a great book. I'm going to tell you, it's a great book for a couple of reasons. Because it's honest. It tells stories and gives people a perspective that so many people don't have, but also it's a quick read. You can read one chapter at a time. You broke it up into, I forget how many chapters, like 10 or 12 chapters, and it's not super long, but each chapter will it kind of grabs a hold of you, and you can read it and you get that, the anxiety and then the conclusion and everything. It's from my perspective, it's a great read, and I encourage anyone to go ahead and buy that, have it delivered. Mine came within like 2 days something, so I strongly recommend that to others.
um, anybody who has any suggestions about questions for Scott on our next podcast, feel free to contact me at a badge well worn at gmail.com, or any suggestions about a topic Or if you happen to be somehow connected to law enforcement, or you've been a victim or a witness of a crime that you want to talk about, let us know and we'll talk, and maybe we can get you on board, and we can share your story. In the meantime, Scott, I look forward to talking to you next time, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for tonight. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jim.
All right.